All right, Lubbock and Plainview, can you see me and hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, Judy, how are you?
Oh, just fine. Thank you. How are you?
Doing great, doing great.
Great, great.
Hanging in there. Glad to be here. Okay, I want to do a little bit of backtracking today. Maybe Lubbock will join us. Looks like we've got a black screen here. But I want to say this to everyone. Come on in. I want to say this to everyone. I realize things are stressful for everybody. I've talked to you about my mom's health. It's improving, but that's been stressful, and we have some other family members that are going through cancer treatments and different things. Uh, I've tried to stay healthy myself, and there are folks that I know that are struggling with different things and COVID, and it's kind of it gets you down sometimes when you think about it. But I try to be faithful. I try to be upbeat, and I'm working hard to try to get these lessons. When I come here and I present all this, I've spent a lot of time getting this textbook ready to teach you because I'm not familiar with it. So if I miss something, y'all let me know. But I'm really doing my best, and I appreciate you all hanging in there and doing your best. Uh, we've been working hours, and I will show you later, hours every day. Uh, I didn't eat dinner until 9:30 last night because we were working on this mosaic down there at Quick Lane. And it's good. It's all good. I'm blessed to be able to do it. I have artist friends that they're not doing their art and getting paid for it, but I am, and we are, and that's a good thing. And so that kind of feeds into what I'm doing here. But if I let it get to me and get me down, and I say, I'm just too tired to come today. I'm too tired to give. Yes, ma'am. I will show you some later. And someone asked me, they said, why don't you post some things on Facebook? And I want to show you something about the mosaic and talk about murals and mosaics today. But thank you, and I will share that with you. Someone said, you should put it on your Facebook page. And I said, I'm going to wait until there's something, because right now you see it, and it's the paper backing that we glue the tile to, and you put it up on the mortar, on the wall. And all you see, you drive by Quick Lane today, you're just going to see a bunch of paper and some duct tape holding it up there. It's like very unimpressive. But you see some lines there that are the design that kind of give you the idea of it. But I will show you. Thank you for being interested. So I want to say this. We've been talking about all these different art materials, right? So I think that's helpful to understand what art is about. And I know many of you have drawn. You draw in your sketchbook or your notebook. You scribble drawings. Some of you have painted. Some of you have done all kinds of other things in art. But I'm wanting to say go over these particular materials, and I'm spending a little extra time bringing the show and tell to you so that you understand it, so that you're with me. Are y'all with me? So that you're understanding what the materials are if you're not familiar with them. And maybe if you are, it may be kind of boring to you. Yes. Oh, okay. Thank you, Brooke. Miss Betts, are you with us? Hello? Lubbock? Come in, Tokyo? Someone? Somewhere? All right. Uh, we lost them. Maybe we'll pick them up again. But Does it help you to see these materials? Does it help you to understand a little bit about it, bringing these things? Because it's more trouble if I don't bring them. I only have a couple more times of show and tell, so I want to show some of that today, but I want to back up a little bit and talk about the difference between, okay, I just lost my connection. Hello? Okay.
I we can hear you.
Very good. Lubbock?
No, this is Judy.
Oh, Judy, okay. Lubbock, are you there? Hello? If you're in Lubbock and you can hear me, raise your hand and wave at me, please. All right, very good. You don't have a facilitator there? If you do, no, down? Okay, all right. Maybe someone will be there, but if you can hear me, that's good. All right. Thank you for being there, and I appreciate your faithfulness. All right, so we're doing this mosaic, and some of you have seen this. I want to put this on screen, if I can get there. But I have people confused about this, and I'm going to contrast that with mural in a moment. And there we go. This is the one that we did that's at Student Services Building here on campus, just right around the corner, right? There's a big inflatable spook right beside it right now, if you've driven or walked by there. I didn't do that, but we did this 20 years ago. This is the mosaic that we did. 3,000 hours to construct this. If you look at this, now everybody look up for just a minute and see this. This is a mosaic, M-O-S-A-I-C. A mosaic is not a mural. And my sweet youngest sister says, "Are you guys finished with your mural?" Well, I think a mural is a type of cigar anyway, but no, this is a mosaic. That's more of a detail, and then some more detailed shots. You can see some of the gold leaf tile in there, and so on. So you can see the individual tiles there, and each one of those was hand cut. There's not many square ones in the whole thing, a few of them, but not many. So they were all hand cut, and if weather permits and time, we'll take a little field trip and go see these other two on campus plus this one. Now, this is not a mural. Some people call it a mosaic mural. This is a fresco mural that's at the Artesia Library, and it was actually moved from Houston. It's on portable panels, but there's a difference between, I'm going to get where I can write something here and go here. There's a difference between, count 5, try again, there we go. There's a difference between a mural, which is a painting, and it can be a fresco, it can be acrylic, it can be spray paint, whatever. There's a difference between a mural and a mosaic. A mosaic is made of individual tiles. They can be glass tiles like ours are, all the ones in Levelland are. It can be colored stones, as they used in ancient Greece and Rome. But a mural is a painting, mural, and a mosaic is made of individual tiles or small pieces that make that. Why am I showing you this? You may see it again later, right? Okay, just for your erudition, right? Okay, so I'm going to skip out of this real quick, and I'm going to go to, I could show you more there, but I'm going to switch from here to today's lesson. I'm going to talk about printmaking, which is our next chapter. These lights are off. It gets dark down here, and I just kind of feel for where to plug in. My wife has her phone so that Siri turns her flashlight on. Y'all do that? Anyway, I don't have that set up that way. But I want to show you something about printmaking, and I'll talk about this as a different form of art. But the thing about printmaking is, let me get back to my instructor cam here. Printmaking is a form of art where you create an original, and the text calls it a matrix. I call it a plate or a block, but you can create an original and then you can make multiples from that. So that's a different thing than any other form of art. So I want to get to this here and talk about a couple of things here in just a moment. But I want to show you something first, and then I may go to the cam here again in a moment. But in fact, let me see. I have okay. We're going to get a little switch here. Y'all bear with me. Things are working pretty well today. Most of you have seen a rubber stamp, right? And you see them in, they may rubber stamp something on a check or something like that. But this is a rubber stamp that we had made for our sign and design business years ago. And I think the ink has stuck it in there. I'm going to have to, it really is stuck. Okay, here's one. This is let me open this up a little bit here. There we go. What's more happy than a happy face, right? But this is a rubber stamp that I bought, and you can see that it's raised up. It's what we call a relief. And I'm not sure if my ink pad is dried up too, but I'm going to take this ink pad and I'm going to push this down here on this. I'm not getting much ink on it. I'm not sure if it'll make an impression or not. We'll see. And then press that on here. Yeah, in the raised surface, we get a happy face. So you can see from this block, or from this raised area, you get an impression. So that's basically what relief printmaking is going to be. And then you're going to see me talk about other relief printmaking. In fact, I have an example here, so I'm going to go back to the instructor cam fully and show this and get everybody on there. Okay, that's good. So I'm going to show you this, and I may go back to the dot cam, but I have a, hello. It's like very slow on the uptick here. Okay. I have a painting here that I did, and I'll put that on the dot cam in a minute. Some of you may recognize this, Jimi Hendrix, kind of legendary guitarist. I play guitar, so back in the day when I was a student, I did this drawing because I was going to learn how to do relief printmaking. So our instructor said, well, you've got actually a smaller block than what your drawing is, so you need to get it black and white, make it smaller, and took this piece of wood. This is just a piece of plywood, and let me put it back on the camera here. This is not switching as easily as it usually does, y'all. Maybe? Okay. Thank you for your forbearance. There we go. Nice black screen. But this wood block here is just a piece of plywood, and it is carved, and I didn't bring my carving tools today, but I used carving tools and carved down below the surface of this. There we go. And you can see where this is just a textured wood block, and you can see it's thin plywood, that's made very flat. And so I carved down below the surface and I left the raised surface. So then I could take put ink on a glass sheet, you can do it on a metal sheet, and pick up the ink on this roller, which we call a brayer, and rub it on there, and then put paper on top of that. And this is a special rice paper that I used, and put it on there, and then rub it with something. You can use your fingers, but it gets friction, really builds up. So I used this spoon, and yes, Mom, I still have your spoon. Thank you very much for the loan of it. And put tape on it, in fact, to kind of help the friction, and rub that, and then you peel this back, and you've got a print made from that. So that's a relief print. Now, if you're making notes, this is a wood block or a wood cut. So it's a type of relief print. I'll show you in the slides today. You'll see in your text. So that's basically what the rubber stamp is. But if you say a relief print is a rubber stamp, not really. A relief print is a wood block or some other method of making where the artist makes something, not where it's manufactured. So that's one example I wanted to show you. And I've done all of these different printmaking methods, so I can talk about this a little bit. I've taught them and done them myself. So let me go back to just the slides, and we'll pick up there if we can get to that and everything functions correctly. Okay. Here we go. Maybe that's it. I want to back up though just a little bit and show you something you may see around town. A couple of things. This is a sign that's now in Script Office Supply. I mentioned them the other day. This is a 4x10 sign that my wife and I did. To kind of their design, and we worked on it together. Levelland is the city of mosaics. But you can see how this is painted with an enamel, a special high-grade sign enamel, painted on an aluminum panel. You see these highway signs that are green and white and black. They're on aluminum panels, which it weathers well. It doesn't corrode like any kind of iron, ferrous metal. But it's coated with a white baked on enamel coating, and then we use this enamel and then put a sealer on it. But you can see it's just hand painted. My wife is using a brush, and you can see the paint mixed up there. So you have to do it in layers. You do this green, and then the other green, and then you begin adding colors to this. And she's got a nice steady hand to do this outlining on the letters. I did that hat. I had to mix about 4 colors. Enamel doesn't mix like other paints. It starts drying almost immediately. So I just had to keep working to get that look of the felt. And I can't tell you what chord that is, but anyway, try to get the look of the guitar for the country music. So each of these letters is like an old postcard. And so the cotton and the grain sorghum and the different things from different mosaics in town here. And that's me painting the longhorn. You see my palette there? It's an old paint tray. I've got all the colors mixed up in there. But that's the cattle and part. So if you look around town, you can see that. Now, I'll talk about some of these other things a little bit later, but I wanted to throw that in there since we've been talking about painting. And now we're talking about printmaking. And if you're following along in the text, I won't spend much time with this, but your text talks about the prints of this French artist, Honoré Daumier, and it gives you the context of the king who allowed more, less censorship, more freedom, and freedom of the press, but it sort of backfired on him because people started lampooning him as someone who sheared the sheep, the poor people, and someone who ingested things and just the request of people didn't do anything with them. And they ended up, this is depicting, this is a horrible picture here because it shows a murder scene. And Daumier was so frustrated, like the French people were, with the corruption that was happening in Paris and all around France. Someone was shooting at the police who were taking down one of these barricades. Have y'all seen Les Miserables? Have you seen that? And they put these barricades in the streets when people tried to take back power. Didn't work so well for them. but someone was shooting at the police in this apartment building, so the police came in and just shot everybody in there. Women, children, old men, babies. And so Damier made this print and put it up in the print shop window. Well, the police immediately confiscated as many as they could find. They had the lithograph stone, you see, this is a lithograph, broken up, and Damier thrown in prison because they didn't want the truth to be out there. Now we've got news photographs, right? And it's almost immediate. Somebody takes a video of an event and posts it on the World Wide Web. So in those days it's a little different. But for someone to show something like this, which really signified the corruption of the French people, and then put it in a print where they could print dozens and dozens of these, was a big deal. And printmaking made that possible. So the artist made an original, and it wasn't like them destroying the original painting or the drawing. There were maybe hundreds of these out there. So a few survived, and we have that one. And then at the end, he was eventually taken out of power. They attempted to assassinate Louis Philippe, the ruler. But Damier was there to kind of balance things out and let people see the corruption that was going on. Well, printmaking made that possible. And it allowed graphic images, not just print, not just a newspaper, but images, which are very powerful things. Now, if you're taking notes, make sure you understand this. Printmaking does really three things. It allows great works of art to be studied from a distance. So you can make a print of a work of art, and it can be shown, sent anywhere in the world. And now on the World Wide Web, yeah. But in the day when these were done, and from the early 1300s, when prints were used by artists, this allowed multiple prints to be made. They're less expensive than original artwork. And then multiples, what we call an edition. Your text calls an edition. Which means that if you have 10, that's an edition of 10. If you have 50 or 100, that's an edition of 50 or 100. So once the original is done, this block that I did here, I made a few prints of this, and I made them in different colors. Some of my friends asked the instructor could you print that on a t-shirt, and he said, if you have the right kind of ink. So I made some money. I printed some of these on t-shirts from this block. And I was telling students about that a year or so ago in class, and this young lady came up after class. She said, could you print that on a t-shirt now? And I said, sure you could. She said, I want one. So we went to the lab and we printed a t-shirt of this image that I did all those years ago, because the block is still good. The relief block that I made could be printed. Yes, sir. Good, of course. Go ahead. You don't have to ask. Just go. So I thought you were ordering a t-shirt. Anyway. So as long as this is not damaged, it's still nice and flat, a print could be made from it. So that's the good thing about this. So when you look at the slide here, it says the three main things that makes printmaking different. And I want to ask you a lot of these things, but your text talks about this being collaborative. So sometimes you have a team of people working. Sometimes it's just the artist, someone who publishes the work. I could give this to someone else and say, I want 100 of these. I wouldn't do that, but I could do that because I have the original block. And so you have a publisher and so on. We'll talk more about ukiyo-e, which is that word, the Japanese word, later. But these prints like this were done, look at the date, around 1794, the Edo period in Japanese art. But again, it's the idea of an original print and then an edition, which is multiples made from that block, or they call it a matrix here. I'm not going to ask you all these things. Spreading ideas and so on. Your authors have this image on page 181, and it talks about it being, I'm not sure what the disturbing images is. This is a story from ancient Greek mythology the Judgment of Paris, and Paris picks one of the three graces, hands them an apple, and so on. Well, you'll see this design later because it's kind of a famous design, but Raphael designed this. We don't have this original, but he copied that, so we have this copy to see what Raphael's original was like. But it was a print engraving, so I'll talk about that in a moment. Here's Posada at the bottom of page 181, a Mexican artist who did these things for Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. These calaveras, the skeletons dancing. You see this all now. There's a show. First time in about 25 years I haven't had an artwork in the Buddy Holly Center for the Day of the Dead. I always have something that's a tribute to someone that I've loved and still love that has passed away. And this year I was too busy with all the mosaic things to do an artwork for that, so I declined to show. But you can go to the Buddy Holly Center now and see the show that's for Day of the Dead. So Posada did this original relief engraving, and then he made multiple prints, so hundreds of these went out, and many of them still exist. This is in the Museum of Modern Art. And this shows Rembrandt's, it says two states, so he did this engraving, and engraving is taking a sharp tool, and he used a metal plate. Usually it was either zinc or steel, and he carved those lines in there. It's not just a drawing. He scratched those lines in there to make this, and then he rubbed ink into it and made the print from that. And then he did some more work to it and then printed the second time, so the light is a little more, it's focused more on the center part. It's a darker print. So you see, these are this is on page 184 in your text. This shows the different printmaking techniques. Now, relief is what I showed you. This is a relief print, okay? So make sure you understand that. And they don't say this is a wood block or wood cut, but that's the terminology that you should use. It can also be other materials like linoleum. The word there, the second word is intaglio, and intaglio is where you have, like an engraving, something carved into the block, the original matrix. Ink is rubbed into that, and then the paper is put through a press, and pressure forces it down into those crevices, and the ink is pulled out. Have you all ever gotten an engraved invitation? Some of you may have had that for your high school graduation, right? And you run your finger across it, and you can feel that raised ink, right? Sometimes wedding invitations are engraved. So it's a little fancier. It's a little more expensive than just a regular print. So that's an intaglio process, and then we'll talk about planographic, and then we'll talk about stencil, or what we call serigraph, silkscreen later. Woodcut print is what I just showed you, okay? And I'm not going to read over all this. These are just slides that I took from the things that they sent us. But a woodcut print I've shown you. So using a sharp tool and carving down into this original plate, you could go find a flat piece of 1x6 and do it yourself. You don't have to have this thing from the art supply store. But you can see how the person took the sharp tool, carved down into the wood. They have this image of a fish transferred on there, and left raised the image of the fish, just like this image is raised on here. And so then, rolling ink onto that surface with the roller, the brayer, this thing I showed you, roll it on there, and this is nice and smooth and flat, picks up the ink, transfers it to there, and then you put paper on there and rub it, and you get a print from it. And this shows the same basic process. When Johannes Gutenberg came up with movable type, and they were able to set this type, this is the first time they could print the Bible. The Bible, before that, it would take years sometimes for a scribe, one of these monks in a monastery somewhere, writing. Can you imagine writing out the entire Bible? Sometimes it's hard for us to write a whole passage or a paragraph of something, but to do the entire Bible, but they made it even more fancy. They did all these illustrations, and that was part of the printmaking technology when this was done in the mid-1400s. So you see the beautiful detail of it, movable type. There are only a few of these Bibles, and two of them are in Texas. This is a 2-volume set that's in Austin at UT. I've not seen this, but my son said it's pretty impressive to see it. And one I think is in Dallas in a private collection there. Okay, Albert Dürer again, right? See the square A and the D below it? We've seen his work before. You remember the rabbit, the hare. This is Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Now, Dürer was really a genius, but he was so skillful at everything he did. But he had this idea. It's kind of like Sam Walton, Walmart. If I can produce something fairly cheaply that people can afford, and I can distribute it widely, bingo, I've made a lot of money. That's what he did. He became very wealthy, and he had a workshop then. He would produce the designs, he would produce the main details of this, but then he had workmen helping him, young apprentices that were very good too. They had to be, because he was right on them to make sure it was done. This is from Revelation, right? In the Bible. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. At the end of time, they come, the pale rider on the pale horse and all that. And it's like, if you're not one of the saved, woe to you. And the angel up there leading them into spiritual battle right at the end. So he knew these scenes would be something people would want to see. So he produced hundreds and hundreds of these, thousands of these. But since he had the original plate, right, they just inked them up and printed them out and distributed them. I have a friend here in town, I can't tell you who it is, but I was at her house one time, and she grew up, her folks were fairly well-to-do. I said, that's such a nice reproduction of Albert Dürer, and these are small ones, just landscape, cityscapes. And she said, that's not a reproduction, that's the real deal. And I said, well, I'm impressed. She didn't make a big deal out of it, but I was impressed. So you see, now I've got just big shapes here on this, but you see what Dürer did? Every little line that's black there that prints, it was a raised piece of wood. How incredible is that? And once it was done, then he could just print and print and print, he and his apprentices. Impressive, really impressive. There's one of Dürer's actual wood blocks that still exists. And this is just a coat of arms that he did for someone. But you see that, and then you see the print made from it. It's a pretty incredible thing. It really is. You can even go, there's an app, an Albert Dürer app. You can check that out. But other artists were doing this at the same time. Someone made the trouble, I mean, it's not a big deal to go to Venice today, but they took the time and trouble to go to Venice and did this drawing, which they turned into a print. And then they bound these views of different major cities into a book. That book sold. It sold because people wanted to see what these places were like, they heard about. And Germany, Italy, parts of Europe were trading with Italy because they could get things that no one else could get, and they were trading with the Orient. So these are all relief prints, right? Woodblock prints. And here's one of Japanese print, Utamaro. But you see all those details in the hair and each little line of the face? That was a raised piece of wood cut in there. And of course, to do the color, they had to do separate wood blocks that lined up, and I'll show you that. When these were shown first in the late 1800s in Paris, they were very influential, and Vincent van Gogh saw them. He tried to imitate them in painting. And we've seen the Great Wave, right, offshore at Kanagawa. And this is one of the 36 views of the sacred mountain, Mount Fuji. And this was done in 3 or maybe 4 colored woodblock. Very amazing. Look at the rain in that. Each one of those little streaks of rain was a raised area on a woodblock print. And that's Hiroshige And I love his views. It's like you're in the orchard, right? You're looking through the trees and the blossoms, and amazing composition. So there's a wood block in a print. And you remember when I showed you this thing of the colors, the CMYK colors? And let's see if I can put this up on the, switch this for a moment. It's going to get there. There we go. Remember when I showed you this before? And these are the CMYK colors. Okay, you see, of course, the white stock, but this is from a ginger ale box. But you can see the different colors, and of course they mixed the cyan, the blue, with the yellow to get that light green, and then they mixed it with black to get this blue. But you see that little target right there? That little, zoom in on this a little bit. That's all the colors lined up, and this is what we call a registration mark. Well, guess what? They had, oh, it was there. There it is. They had their own registration process way back in early Japan, because that little notch at the bottom there, that little corner, and then that little edge that's raised there, all the prints that printed, each color, each one of the prints lined up there, and so then it was registered. All the colors were right, perfect, just like we do today in doing printing. So you can see how the raised areas took the ink, and of course they did this with other blocks that printed the colors. Here's a Milde, German artist, very moody kind of thing that you can do with this strong black and white in prints, and you do have this one in your text on page 186. Katkovitz again, the widow. She saw a lot of grief in her country, went through 2 world wars, can you imagine, in Germany. There's still devastation there. They've rebuilt so much, but they've left some of it so people won't ever forget how horrible it was in Germany. And this captures that moodiness, that expression, the grieving widow. So printmaking does that, this stark black and white. You have this on the next page, 187. It shows the color woodcut and how each of the colors is done separately on a different block and how they line up with the registration. My friend who lives down near Dripping Springs came and did a couple of workshops for me when I taught at high school, and I was able to purchase one of her prints. But this is, there are artists doing this today. She actually studied in Japan when her husband was there working with the Army Corps of Engineers. But she brushes her color on the block like the Japanese did. But that's about a 7-color block. So it's 7 separate different blocks, each had a color on it. But that sky was actually brushed on ink that printed. This is Monument Valley in the Four Corners area. If you ever get to go there, you'll see these amazing structures you see in movies all the time. So wood engraving is a little different. Wood engraving, you carve in a really hard wood, or sometimes the end grain of wood, like they show here, if you know wood, and you have a special tool. That's a no-no to carve toward yourself, but anyway, you've got to have a stop or something, because if you slip, it's going to be a reminder that it's a very, very sharp tool. Anyway, so instead of the raised areas having the design, you carve these fine lines in there, and it's different than a big wood block area. This is the John Wesley Powell went on this suicide trip down the Colorado River. These guys lived to tell the tale, but he did these drawings that then he turned into wood engravings, so people could see this amazing Grand Canyon. And so he was able to print a lot of those, and you see different wood engravings like this, but they look almost like an ink drawing because there's so much detail there. My folks have this old family Bible, and it's not really been in our family all that long. The illustrations in there are Doré illustrations. You may see these. that they reproduced in this more, our Bible is in 1856, but they reproduced in more modern Bibles. They look like drawings. And look at that wood engraving. You see the lines that the tool carved in there, right? These fine, fine lines in a very hard wood. Linoleum, like we have as flooring, they also mount it on blocks of wood, and you can buy it at Hobby Lobby or Michael's Varsity Bookstore. You can carve into this because it's a little smoother and it doesn't have any grain to it, and a lot of people prefer it. Have any of you done woodblock printmaking or linoleum printmaking? Yeah. So what did you do? So, but you've done it, right? And they even make a rubber that you can use that's even softer than linoleum. And someone said, can you do it with styrofoam? Well, they make these styrofoam blocks that you can draw on or carve away. And the raised area prints just like this. So it's all relief printmaking. But you can do multicolor prints like this one. This is not in the text either, but it's an interesting thing. This one is on page 189. Elizabeth Catlett, this amazing artist, black woman artist, beautiful, showing the sharecropper with this big straw hat on. Very powerful image. And you can print on silver foil and different things. There's what's eventually going to happen to Hollywood, right? No, I don't know. Anyway, so intaglio, and that's not intaglio. That sounds like food, doesn't it? But it's an Italian word, Latin word, which means to cut into. Intaglio. So the matrix or the surface is cut into with a sharp tool. It's some kind of metal. You can use copper, you can use zinc, steel. But engravings and these other things, I'm going to talk about mainly engraving and etching there. So you don't have to write all these down. We'll go through and talk about them in turn. But your text has this, and even etching. Etching uses an acid. So you put like black asphalt. That's really what it is, like they have on the streets and parking lots. You put that on a copper or steel plate. You scratch through that coating with a sharp tool, then you put it in an acid bath for a short amount of time, and then you take it out with special tools so you don't burn your fingers, wash it off, clean the asphalt off with paint thinner or something, turpentine, and then you rub ink into it, and the lower areas that the acid etched or ate into the surface, that prints just like an engraving does. It's a little easier. I was, first year I taught, I told one of the students to be sure in 15 minutes to take that out of the acid bath, and I had it in a cabinet. And they forgot, I forgot. On Monday morning, I found it in there, and it was just the shell of the asphalt. The metal had eaten away in the acid over the weekend, so we started all over again. So that's etched lines, and then they rub the ink on there. You can roll it on, but you rub it in there, and then you print it like this. This shows where they wipe away the ink, and it's left in the crevices, which is what's usually done. And the raised ink prints. The ink that's in the crevices prints, and it's a raised area. And this shows engraving again, carving. You have this in your text. Here's Dürer again, Albrecht Dürer. This is not in your text, but I wanted you to see this because you can see how he progressed. This is Adam and Eve. This is before paradise was lost, right? And they were innocent of they were without sin, right? So Albrecht Dürer is carving this into a metal plate, and he prints it at different stages. So eventually he gets to the point where all the lines are done, the ink's rubbed into it, rubbed off, and the print is from the engraved lines he carved in there himself. Albrecht Dürer did that, Rembrandt van Rijn. Dürer was a German artist, Van Rijn was a Dutch artist. Rembrandt, we usually know him as, doing the same subject here, and using it, etching. And you see the enemy up there at the top, right there, the serpent, saying, you won't die. God's not telling you the truth. Well, and this is Rembrandt again. Your text talks about dry point engraving, aquarelle, all these different things, aquatint. I'm not going to ask you about those things. But I want you to see this etching. Now, this is the angel appearing to the shepherds. He has good news. The Christ child has just been born. So here is a very well-known story from the Bible, and Rembrandt puts a lot of detail into it. Each of those lines he carved himself with a tool. He worked mainly by himself. Rembrandt was an amazing artist. And Goya, this is aquatint. And we've seen Goya before, right? But this is his series of disasters of war, the horrors of this. And of course, he could make these prints and distribute those so people could see what the horror that was actually going on. And your text talks about this a little bit. This is the mezzotint that's not in the text, and talks about dry point. Mary Cassatt, that's her as an older artist, but she did these amazing dry point engravings. It's hard work to do printmaking. It's hard work. But once you produce the original, then you can print multiples from it. Edward Hopper's in your text on page 194. This is one of Hopper's etchings. Look at that viewpoint, looking down on the scene from up above there. Your text doesn't mention this, but some of you have done collages, right? You've glued material on a cardboard or paper. You can actually, if it's raised enough, you can rub ink on that or roll ink on it and make a print from it. So we call that collagraph. The word graph means writing or making an image. And then they talk about planographic process. Lithography, if I ask you which method of printing is the most common used, which method of printmaking is used to make your textbook or a newspaper or a poster, it's that word right there, lithography. It's the most common. A lithograph originally means, litho means stone. That's from the Greek, lithos. And graph always means writing or drawing, they say here. But lithography is a method of printmaking originally from a stone. Now we use metal plates, their texture, to be like a stone, because it's so expensive to get the stones, and the best stones, the quarry's probably exhausted now. But you see where they use a greasy crayon, and then they clean it off, but the stone or the metal plate, you clean it off with paint thinner. I've done these detailed drawings before, and then the professor said, okay, now we're gonna wash it off, and you pour paint thinner on there and you wipe it, and it's like, it's gone. He said, it's not gone, because it retains, where it's greasy, it retains a memory of that. And in fact, you couldn't even touch it with your fingers, because the fingerprint oil would transfer and make a fingerprint that would print. So you had to be super careful. And then you wet it step number 4, and you roll ink on it, and you put it through a press, because it has to be a lot of pressure, and then you roll it through there. They show just a primitive press here, and then you have a print. This shows in your text a little different method of that, page 196. But then you have to treat it with a special solution, and then you wet it. But where it's wet, the greasy ink doesn't stick to it. It sticks to where it was greasy before. Oil attracts oil. Grease attracts grease. And then you have this print. So I'm not going to get into all that. This is a lithograph that Daumier did. And you can see the texture of the stone transferred there, this horrible scene. But things that are more lighthearted, like this clown, this woman, clowness, Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec did this, color lithograph, and Katsikovic did this one. It's one of my favorite printmaking methods. Now, this is one of my favorite artists. You'll say, Mr. Hope, you always say you have a favorite artist. Well, I've got lots of them. But this is one of my favorite. If you don't know MC Escher, you should discover him. But here is this fun image of him turning a two-dimensional drawing into a three-dimensional thing. It's like his hands are drawing his hands, right? So the lithograph, now the thing about a lithograph, you cannot make a mistake because you cannot correct it. And so you're drawing with this greasy crayon or using paint, painting this greasy material on there. You can't make a boo-boo at all. You can't correct it. You got to start all over again. So you can imagine doing this kind of detail. And here's his up and down staircase, relativity. Every direction you turn this, it seems right in one position. So this is, that's Escher. Now stenciling is next in your text. And stencil is using silk screen. Have some of you done silk screen before, printmaking? Have you seen it before? Some of your t-shirts may be printed with a silk screen, some are transfer prints. But a silk screen is using a stencil and making a stencil on some kind of fabric. Usually silk is used, but nowadays we have synthetic materials that are cheaper than silk. So they're stretched on a frame, you make a stencil, and the stencil can be more than just a cutout thing. You can transfer an image so that it's using chemicals, and you make the stencil that way. But then using a rubber squeegee, and I've started to bring all my silk screen stuff today. I just didn't do it because I've got big silk screens and things that I've done. Andy Warhol, silk screening was done because they could produce labels for boxes. And Andy Warhol saw this because he was in the advertising industry in New York City. And he said, you know, if I could take that and do art with it, I would have something. Well, if you own one of these Warhols, especially now that he died, each one is worth six figures. $200,000 to $1 million for an Andy Warhol. So he took an image, and by the way, the Marilyn Monroe estate sued Andy Warhol and got a lot of money because he had used her image without permission. But he said, it's okay, I've got lots of money. And he did. But he used that image and printed it all kinds of different ways. He printed famous movie stars, everybody from Mick Jagger to Elvis. But he did these images with silkscreen, but he did a lot of things from nature too. And he made the silkscreen. I'll show you something about that. Here's Chuck Close, who did his self-portrait with his new style because of his health. But you can see the shapes there. I'll talk about Chuck more a little bit later and how he did things. And this is what's called a monotype. Now, I asked students one time, what does mono mean? And someone said, you're very sick. But mono means what? One, right? So you can't, it's not really a printmaking method because you take a plate of plastic or metal or whatever, and you sort of paint on it, and then you put the paper on there and rub it and print. Well, you can't do it again. So it's not really a printmaking method like the others. But you've made a print, you transferred an image onto paper. So that's a monotype. Now, our youngest son had a business in Austin for a few years and did printmaking with silkscreen. So that's him there with his silkscreen and a stenciled image. He's checking to make sure all the screen's ready for printing. That's another image that he did. That's it in the printmaking jig that he set up. And you see the ink is on there. He has a wooden blade with a rubber squeegee, a wooden handle with a rubber blade in it, squeegeeing that through, pushing it through the fabric. So the stencil keeps it, holds the ink back. But where the white areas are is where you can see light through the stencil. So the rubber squeegee and these tiny little pores of the fabric, it forces it through there and it makes a print. So you see, once he's done that, the print transferred onto the t-shirt. And he could do that. He did dozens and sometimes hundreds of these for clients. They just had Austin City Limits. He set up a booth there and sold a lot of things online too. But you can see the images. he said, this parachute series he did in multicolor, he said, they call me Pop. He said, if anybody wants a t-shirt, I still got some. So, anyway, he did a lot of different designs using that, silkscreen method. Now, we talked about monotype, additions are possible, and this is the monotype that's in the previous text, but it went back to, Castiglione, the Italian artist, did these 1655. He basically painted on a metal plate and then made a print from it, but he couldn't do it again. And he did this one. And you could do it on a piece of plexiglass or glass, paint it on there, using a wooden spoon this time, rubbing the design. That's a monotype. And William Blake, y'all know William Blake, the poet, visionary. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. You ever heard that? William Blake did this as a monotype. Degas, the French artist, did this of the ballet, one of his favorite themes. Did some beautiful things. Now, what is printmaking today? Y'all, any of you have a 3D printer at home? Have you used one? We've got some on campus here. This is a 3D printed skull from a raster image that the artist created, fed it into the computer, and voila, he's got a 3D print of the skull. I'm not sure those shoes would be very comfortable. They were on a runway show. They actually scanned this model and then produced a dress that form-fitted her, 3D printed. This is called a relievo, and they got permission from the Van Gogh Museum to scan his paintings, and they produced an exact, thick 3D print, even showing the texture of the canvas and the wire, and even the labels on the back. Reproduced them exactly. So for just a mere $34,000 plus, you can have a copy, a 3D print of a Van Gogh. Somebody in Hong Kong had the money to do that, and they could even do sculpture, 3D printed sculpture, famous things like that. So any questions about printmaking? Okay. We'll pick up next time with talking about photography and video. So I'll see y'all. Next test will be a week from Tuesday on the 19th. Y'all be safe.
Mr. Hope?
Yes?
Just letting you know I was here.
All right. Glad you made it. Take care of yourself.
Oh, I am. I had a work study student. We were trying to get logged in. That's why I was
All
a little
right.
late. Okay.
No problem. Thank you. Take care.